So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And now let's understand basic Facebook ad matrix. Now what this is a set of statements that you need to know at the back of your fingertips before you start any ad campaign, because without this basic ad metrics and the understanding, you are pretty much going to be running ad campaigns from a blind perspective because you're not going to know cause and effect. And just let me tell you, right, that apart from the fact that a more experienced marketer compared to a non-experienced marketer, the more experienced marketer will be better at audience persona definition and so on and so forth. Very often, the difference between the white belt and the black belt lies in its optimization. In other words, the troubleshooting skill is the skill you want to have, not to necessarily get everything right at the start, but to fix the wrong and to know which parts are wrong that can be improved. That is the skill you want to have. And that skill is going to take time to develop, because imagine that this is one of the most valuable skills in digital marketing: the ability to solve campaign problems, whether it's a banned ad account or your campaigns are running sluggishly and you fix it to make it work. Because if you can make this magic happen, guess what? I think you're almost bulletproof. You can sell anything to anybody because you understand the platform so well, and every roadblock that you encounter, you can resolve it really, really effectively. But I warn you, it's going to take you years because you're dealing with various entities, Facebook and their quirkiness to start off with. I can tell that having been doing digital marketing for a good 15 years of my life, Facebook ad platform is the quirkiest platform I've ever encountered, and I think many seasoned ad marketers would agree as well. They're highly inconsistent, and their rules are just not uniformly applied. But deal with it, my friends, right? They are the big elephant in the room, and it's a defeatist approach to say, wow, Facebook sucks, I got my account banned, let's stop running Facebook ads. That's a defeatist approach. Find a solution. If not, your life will you end up crippling yourself, like a lot of people have done in this pandemic. I think you know, right? It's shocking to me the proportion of people that resort to food delivery and Grab, because in their world, there's nothing else out there that can generate an income. But these people are the same people that rejected every other opportunity that came along the way. Like, multi-level is not for me, digital marketing is slow, I don't want to learn this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. You end up skillless, valueless, and I think it is sad. But hey, I'm not Jesus Christ, I'm not Allah, I'm not good fella, I'm not Gandhi, I'm not here to save the world. So let's get back to this topic here, right? It's important you understand that superior knowledge and skills cannot be rushed. The best I've heard in terms of illustration is this: if factually the mastery of Facebook advertising could make you, in terms of money, equivalent amount of money as a highly paid neurosurgeon. Now let me ask you, do you know what a neurosurgeon does? Okay, a neurosurgeon operates on brain for a living. A neurosurgeon takes a minimum of 20 years of specialized training to get to that level where he's ready to operate on your brain. Let me ask you, have you heard of a 2-day course in neurosurgery? I have not, have you? And even if you have heard of it, would you want a neurosurgeon that just graduated from a 2-day class to work on your brain? You wouldn't. Same concept, I'm just trying to make you understand that if it is true, and it is true, that a ninja Facebook marketer can take home a surgeon's income, you need to respect the sanctity of the skill set. That if this skill set can bring you a surgeon's income, this skill set is worth mastering, and it will take you a lifetime to master it. And it starts here. Because if you don't understand the following lines and statement, I'm not saying you can't run ads. I'm saying you can run ads, but you do not know what you're doing. And you end up with a dead end very quickly when you realize you put your ads together, you put your money, it doesn't work, you pause. What do you do next? Well, don't know. Let's try something else. That's not the key. The greatest skill to have is the ability to troubleshoot something that's not working and make it work. If you can do that, you'll be on a roll, and one day you will earn more than what a surgeon is going to earn because you're solving arguably a more difficult problem, and that more difficult problem is how to make money with no money. Let's start. So, question number 1. How does Facebook charge advertisers? Or in other words, what is Facebook's charging model? And I know that you guys are going to be waiting for my answer. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So, this is really, really crucial. You know this factually because it really impacts the pricing model. So every time you get charged, you need to understand why are you charged this price. Because without you understanding why you are charged a specific price, you don't understand whether you're moving on the right track. Are you experiencing an abnormal situation where you are charged an insane amount of money? And most importantly, how to troubleshoot if you don't understand this. So the answer is that Facebook's charging model is well documented. And the answer is CPM. Right? You need to drill this into your mind. And not only do you need to know the pricing model, you need to understand what it means and how the price is determined itself. So CPM stands for cost per mil. And I believe mil is Latin for 1,000. And so CPM is therefore cost per 1,000. Now cost per 1,000 what? Cost per 1,000 impressions. So this is a starting point. It doesn't matter whether you're a guru or you're a newbie, right? Facebook charging model is CPM. CPM is cost per 1,000 impressions. And now let's define what is impressions. So impressions, an impression occurs when an ad is served. The ad is served. Now, the ad does not have to be seen to be served. So an ad does not have to be viewed. As long as the ad was served, and let's again have a very defined definition of serve. What do we mean by that? So we go back to our good friend on Facebook. And I'm going to scroll. And I see a sponsored ad. This ad has been served. This ad will now incur 1 impression. It doesn't matter whether I notice it. It doesn't matter whether I scroll past it. This ad has been rendered. This ad right now would have incurred 1 impression because it appeared on my newsfeed and I went past it. That's 1 impression. So, CPM is 1,000. So therefore, the price that you pay is denoted in CPM. And for example, $5 CPM simply means that the ad for that at that particular time, at that particular audience, after 1,000 impressions of the ad, you'll be charged $5. Now, understand that the ad could be 5 CPM. The ad could also be 50 CPM. That's the challenge with a CPM model, because it changes the whole dynamics of your advertising efforts, because the variation can be 10 times itself. And it's important you understand right from the start the myths of CPM. So number 1 is high CPM is not always bad. Low CPM is not always good. So what do I mean by this? A high CPM is not always bad. A low CPM is not always good. So what I mean is that you cannot just look at your campaign performance based on CPM alone. CPM is cost, and it's going to be a mistake when you look at low CPM to say this is great and high CPM is bad. Why? Because marketing and marketing effectiveness is rarely what we call binary. Binary means 1 or 0. It's not necessarily 1 or 0. It could be in between as well. And that's the first mistake a lot of marketers make. That you figure out, you determine the success of a campaign based on cost and not ROAS. And that's where the problem comes. And this is prevalent, especially if you're running what we call lead generation campaigns. So lead generation campaigns, after a certain amount of impressions, you get clicks to website, and then you get number of people who register. And every marketer, seriously, even myself, would be happy with a low cost per lead, and we typically frown at a high cost per lead. So for example, we are led to believe that a $5 per lead is better than $20 per lead. That is also not correct, because unless you are able to track all the way to the sale, you cannot conclude that the $20 per lead is lousier than the $5 per lead. The only thing you can ascertain is that the $5 per lead is cheaper than the $20 per lead. That's the only statement you can make. You cannot conclude it's more effective, because what if you found out that actually after looking at your sales record and tracking all the way back, you realize that all the sales came from the $20 per lead and none of the $5 per lead converted? How did it change your marketing? Well, in the same way that you need to view CPM as well. Because I can tell you from an experience standpoint that very often high CPM returns to us higher quality prospects, and low CPM returns lower quality prospect. Not always true, but very often is true. In other words, you typically pay what you get. There's a reason why Facebook is charging you $1 CPM, for example, for a certain market, and $50 CPM for another market. And it doesn't always mean that $1 is better than $50 or vice versa. You have to look at the outcome, the ROAS, to be the ultimate decider. And very often, the one with the highest ROAS is not necessarily the lower CPM, neither is it the higher CPM. Okay, so it's something that you need to be mindful of. So CPM is the only way Facebook charges. And tied with CPM is impressions. So the more impressions, the more you pay, because Facebook charges by CPM. Now, in case you're wondering, but doesn't all ad platform charge by CPM? The answer is no. Google, for example, Google search ads is not charged by CPM, it's charged by CPC, cost per click. So in case you're wondering, you mean to tell me in Google world, if no one clicks on the ad, you don't pay? That's exactly what I'm saying. Because it's CPC, cost per click. You don't pay for impressions, you pay for clicks. In Facebook, you're not charged by click, you're charged by impressions. Now, this leads to a whole series of, are you saying this? Like, are you saying that if I had more clicks for impressions, I don't pay more? Answer is yes. So if you had 1,000 impressions, whether you have 1 click or 10 clicks, you pay the same price. Let me elaborate this more as we go down this basic metric slide. So let's go to the next statement. You know, the first answer was CPM, cost per mil. Second one is this: the number of people an ad is shown to is known as. Now, in case you were wanting to utilize your newfound skill and say this is impressions, well, it is not. Let me give you the right answer. The number of people an ad is shown to is known as reach. Number of people reach is the number of people an ad is shown to. So if reach is 1,000, which is available in the reports, then what you are seeing is that 1,000 people saw your ad. If you choose reach, REACH, as an objective, then the implication is, well, Facebook will help you maximize your ad exposure to the most number of people at the lowest cost. So these semantic definitions are all very crucial. Number of people, and don't confuse number of people with number of times. So bullet 2 was referring to number of people an ad is shown to. That's known as reach. Now the number of times an ad is shown is known as impressions. So reach, number of people that sees the ad. Impressions, number of times an ad is shown. Let's proceed. Number of times a person sees an ad. I know they all sound the same, but it's not the same. The number of times a person sees the same ad. The right answer here is frequency. And this is the number of times the number of times a person sees the ad. So if the person sees the ad on average 3 times, frequency is 3.0. Now we can start to deal and dabble with formula, because yes, frequency equals to impressions divided by reach equals frequency. So impressions can equal reach. In that situation, frequency is 1. In more realistic cases, impressions should exceed reach, and in this case, frequency is more than 1.0. Let's move on. So the next thing we want to look at is CTR. And CTR stands for, of course, most of you who are in digital marketing already know this. This is not rocket science. CTR stands for click through rate, which is number of clicks divided by number of impressions. So if you had 1 click out of every 100 impression, then your CTR equals to 1 out of 100 or 1%. this is a good point to pause and understand very, very basic math. And we're going to move from here to build up your understanding. And I'm going to add one more zero below. Why? Because CPM is based on 1,000 impressions. So when you denominate everything to 1,000 for CPM, my maths teacher reminded me you add a zero below, you add a zero on top. So 10 clicks out of 1,000 impressions will still return you 1%. Now, additionally, it is also good to know that the average CTR for Facebook ads is 1%. So you're now able to benchmark and therefore determine that for every 1,000 impressions, I should receive 10 clicks to my ad. Now, if I do that and achieve 10 clicks, therefore, I will achieve a 1% CTR, and that is considered average because average is 1% for Facebook ads. So now you have a basis and a benchmark to determine whether your ad is performing better than the rest or worse than the rest. And knowing this is important because it tells you whether you should be taking immediate action and start to panic, or are you doing okay and pat yourself on the back itself. So the CTR is the first measure of the acceptance of your ad by your audience. So in other words, if I'm going to look at how your ads have performed, the first thing I look at is your CTR. Is your CTR at 1% above or below? If your CTR is way below 1%, for example, 0.5, 0.3, I know you have what? I know you have a product to market fit problem, or essentially you have a targeting issue, or your offer is weak, or both. And that's the reason why your CTR sucks at 0.5. And therefore, immediate actions required to salvage the otherwise declining situation just on CTR alone. Next, let's look at this average CTR. You know the answer is 1%. And average CTR is not 1% throughout the web. It's 1% on Facebook ads in general. In Google, the average CTR should be much higher at 5% or more, and certainly not at 1%. But on Facebook, the average is 1%. But if you want to take note of this, Google Ads average CTR should be 5% or better. If you are performing at below 5%, you are underperforming for Google search ads. I'm going to explain why when we get there one day, right? So let's proceed. Now, this is a little bit more complicating. A doubling in CTR from 1% to 2% will reduce cost per click by how many percent? It's getting a bit trickier right now. And it's going to be a bit more difficult to answer. A doubling of CTR from 1% to 2% will reduce costs per click by how much? Well, to answer this question, we now have to map CTR with CPM and build in some assumptions. So let's start with CPM, because we know that CPM is cost per thousand. So let's assume for easy numbering, we start at a cost of $10 CPM. Follow me as best as you can in the workings. So there you go, 10 CPM is the cost, but it is not the cost per click, it's the cost per thousand, remember? So we convert cost per thousand into cost per click by making the following assumptions. Let's assume 10 CPM, and let's assume CTR equals 1% because we said average. So therefore, $10 will get you 1%, which is like this, or 10 out of 100, because we determine that over here. So if $10 after 1,000 impressions gets us 10 clicks, each click therefore is $1. I hope you can follow along this basic math. If not, you're in deep trouble, my friends. Okay, so $10 gets you 10 clicks, assuming 1% CTR. Therefore, each click is 10 divided by 10 equals to $1 a click. Now, let's look at the question. The question is a doubling of the CTR. So, if we double the CTR to 2%, now what do we need to change on top? We need to change 10 to 20 because it's 2%. 2% is 20 divided by 1,000. So what's happening here right now is that the CTR has resulted in twice the number of clicks because it's a doubling of the CTR. So instead of getting 10 clicks, we now get 20 clicks. But we still pay the same amount because the charging model is CPM. And therefore now we are able to divide, instead of 10 clicks over $10, we now divide 20 clicks over $10. And the result therefore is we get twice the value or half the price. And now we have the answer we need. A doubling of CTR from 1 to 2 will lead to what? Will help reduce cost per click by, instead of paying $1, you're paying 50 cents. Okay, so each click is costing you 50% less, and the answer would be reduce cost per click by 50%. Because instead of paying $1, you're now paying 50 cents per click, and therefore a cost reduction on CPC by 50%. So what I'm saying therefore is that your basic strategy is this. If you can lift your CTR from $1 to $2, you will reduce your costs of your ads by 50%. Now, if you can quadruple your CTR from 1 to 4%, your cost will drop down to only 25%, and you will save 75% of cost. So in other words, there is a direct and inverse relationship between CTR and cost per click. Let's continue. Let's go to the next definition, CR. And CR stands for conversion rate. Conversion rate. Let's continue here. The average conversion rate for lead generation is how many percent? And for sales, how many percent? Again, these are average numbers for social media. I'm going to share with you the numbers. So, CR for lead gen is 5 to 10%. CR for sales, which means e-commerce, is 1 to 3%. We're talking about average, of course. Now, why do you want to know what the average number is? Because now we are going to answer or define the next metric, which is a doubling of CR from 1 to 2% and its impact on cost per sale. Not cost per click, but cost per sale. So, going back again to the drawing board, I want you to understand that in calculating cost per sale, you have to make assumptions, obviously. We're not looking at profit per sale, we're looking at cost per sale. How much does it cost to generate a sale? So, what we need to do here to figure this thing out and use basic math is to make the assumption on conversion rate. Now, let's take back our assumption on clicks, and therefore, if conversion rate is 1%, because that's a question, what would the cost per sale be? And the cost per sale can be calculated because 1% is therefore 1 out of 100. And we know, let's assume that click-through rate is also 1%. So let's start building from here. Oops. So when you're new to all these things, please use easy numbers to work things out, which is what I'm doing right now for you, right? We assume a 1% CTR at $10 CPM, because this is all the cost information and assumptions that we need. And now we add a CR of 1%, which we know is also 1 divided by 100. But here's the difference. CTR of 1% equals to 1 click out of 100 impressions, or 10 clicks for 1,000 impressions. This is where we are. And we know that $10 buys you 10 clicks. So cost per click equals to $1 per click. Assuming CTR of 1%. I hope you can follow me, yeah? So it cost me $1 per click. To find out the total cost based on CR at 1%, well, it would be much easier if you knew what that 1 and 100 meant. So 100 means 1 sale for every 100 clicks. So now the clicks becomes the denominator. And we know how much it costs 1 click, which is $1. And therefore 100 clicks is going to cost you $100. And therefore, at 10 CPM, 1% CTR, CR of 1%, cost per sale is going to be $100. Now, but the question is not 1%. The question is, what if CR doubles from 1 to 2%? Well, let's update this. 2 sales instead of 1. We are paying $100, but we divide it by 2 sales. Now it's $50 per sale. And this is the answer you're looking for. That assuming conversion rate improve from 1 to 2%, you're making twice the amount of sales at the same cost, and therefore your cost per sale goes down by, reduce cost per sale by 50%. That is the answer you are looking for. If you don't totally get it, no worries. Wait until the video is done and you can review the video at your own time. I hope you're enjoying this mental gymnastics at this point in time, especially towards the end of the day. And I'm throwing the last question over here as part of your required knowledge. In order for Facebook to complete its learning, it requires a minimum of how many data points? Data points is also known as conversions within a how many day period? That is the question. So let me give you the answer, because it's one of those either you know it or you don't. So in order for Facebook to complete its learning, it requires a minimum of 50 data points. So 50 data points, otherwise known as 50 conversions. So depending on what your conversion action is, If it's lead generation, then we're talking about 50 forms being submitted. If it's e-commerce, then we're referring to 50 sales. That's what we mean by data points and conversions. The next part, which is fairly critical, is the time period that you need to accomplish this goal of yours. So we know that we need to accrue or accumulate 50 data points to help Facebook with the learning. And we need to accomplish this within a 7-day period. So in the event you wanted to calculate average number of leads per day you need to achieve, you take 50 divide by 7, and it works out to 7.14, or well, it is 7.14 conversions per day, or to round up, we're looking at 8 conversions per day. Now, in case you're wondering, at what level is this data? And I know we haven't really gone that deep yet in terms of campaign, ad sets, and ads. But since we are looking at this number, I must just tell you right now, we're looking at the ad set level. So 8 conversions a day per ad set, or per winning ad set. And this is the minimum threshold. It has to be uninterrupted. So we'll talk more about these things in terms of what can you change during the 7-day period, what you shouldn't change, and so on and so forth. But to answer this question at least, then we're looking at the data point requirement of 50 data points or conversions within a 7-day period for Facebook to complete its learning. So what does it mean for you as an advertiser? Remember that when we first started this training, we looked at the importance of Facebook's machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they being scripts need the right feeding of information. Just as how a pilot feeds in the route into the flight management computer, and the autopilot reads the route in the FMC to navigate the plane safely from point A to point B, you are doing the same thing over here. That because of this information, number one, if you have too little a budget, because remember that in order to get 8 conversions a day and 50 conversions over a 7-day period, you need to work backwards to find out how many clicks do you need, your conversion rate, and your click-through rate numbers to determine how much traffic you need to bring to the website. Because if your conversion rate is 1%, which is not good, you will need to achieve 8 conversions, you need 800 visitors to visit your website every single day to get 8 conversions at a conversion rate of 1%. And as I just said, it is going to be a very difficult thing to do because you will need enough traffic to drive to the website. And of course, very quickly you'll realize that at 1% CTR And at 1% conversion rate, you are effectively doomed because it becomes too expensive. Because hypothetically, at 10 CPM, we know that each cost per click is $1. And to get 8 conversions out of anything, we will need 800 clicks. And that is $800. Now, is it profitable or not? It depends on what you're selling. If it's a high ticket item, it could be profitable. If you're selling a product at maybe $500, because $500, well, depending on your profit margin itself, may make it work. But if you're going to spend $800 per sale, well, let me correct myself, right? At 8 conversions a day to meet the data point requirement, if your CTR and your CR remains at 1% each, you are doomed because it's going to cost you $800 per sale. Let me say this again. Even I'm confused. Now, at 1% conversion rate, 8 sales, actually what it is 1 sale per 100. And your cost per sale is $100. And 8 sales will therefore cost you $800. But nothing to be worried about because it really depends on what you're selling and your profit margin. So your break even is $100 per sale. And if you're going to make $200 profit and that profit costs you $100, you're fine because you have a 2-to-1 or an ROAS of 2-to-1. So for every $200 profit, you spend $100 making that sale. Or in other words, for every $100 you spend, you return $200 in profit. It is profitable. You can continue doing this forever in that sense. But that also means that you cannot sell a product whose profit is less than $100 because at $100 it's going to be break even and below $100 it's going to be a loss. So is there a problem with 1% CTR, 1% conversion rate? Well, that's not really a problem. The question is, can you hurdle over the cost it takes to drive 100 visitors because only one will convert into a sale? And what we're saying here, that for the last line, 1 sale a day is not enough because Facebook will not complete its learning because it doesn't have enough sale data or data points. You need to have 8 sales a day continuously for 7 days a week for Facebook to complete its learning. Now, what happens when Facebook completes its learning? When Facebook completes its learning, it has a fairly good idea on who your target audience is, and it would help you find more similar customers within that audience that you define. Which means if your audience size is 50,000, it would help you find people within that 50,000 population that are very similar to the 50 data points that you provided Facebook. But you need 8 sales a day on average over a 7-day period.